The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those who are not familiar with the A-APRP, we were actually founded by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968 in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. So our objective here at the A-APRP is Pan-Africanism. The way we define that is as a totally liberated and unified Africa under scientific socialism, as defined in the 5th Pan-African Congress. Today, as you can see, I have my fellow comrades with me, Jesse and Winfred. But before we get started into our episode, we usually dedicate each episode to two of our ancestors. The two ancestors that we will be dedicating this episode to will be Kwame Ture. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with Kwame Ture. He's actually one of the reasons why I'm in this organization. He was a longtime organizer, started off with SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Then he moved on to the Black Panther Party. I believe he was there for a short period. And then after that, he started organizing with the A-APRP. One of the founding members of the A-APRP, put in so much work and dedicated his life to the struggle as well. So, and then also we like to dedicate this episode to another ancestor, Queen Anne Nzingha. She was a revolutionary who fought against the Portuguese and what we know today as present Angola. So she's put a lot in the work, and she she fought off those forces, for a good amount of time. So we implore everyone to definitely study both of those ancestors. So to jump into our topic for today, we will be discussing how to organize in a pandemic. So one of the first questions I think I'll present to my comrades is, I guess, how has the pandemic affected our organizing, I guess, in the A-APRP?
So just to mention, again, Kwame Ture is another reason why I joined the organization, because I went on the spiral watching his videos. And of course, we're in this Kaji circle in the A-APRP, and it's an online circle. So I would say a lot of people have already been familiar with communication spaces like Zoom or whatever, or however you would have a space of organizing. And it's just, it goes to show you, like, political education could still happen. You could still talk to people and have serious conversations and get serious work done, even if it's not in a physical context. So there's no limit, like the revolution we say forward ever, because it's like, it don't matter. Even if there wasn't a pandemic, we would be able to do it. But I think seeing that I've joined this organization, not being, in a organization prior to this, and I'm not, being where I'm at here too, is like, I didn't have any reference. So just doing it online has made it sort of like me see the work could still be done, because we're still, we're in meetings, the same work could still be accomplished. But the pandemic, I guess, does add a little difference when it comes to meeting up at locations and having that service type infrastructure where you're feeding like breakfast programs and things like that.
Yeah, most definitely. I kind of similar backstory. I learned about the A-APRP just by watching like Kwame Ture videos. I think there is this extended interview from Eyes on the Prize I watched, and then I just went into a spiral.
Yeah. I know that interview. Yeah.
I haven't finished. I've never finished that. I gotta watch it.
Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah.
There's definitely been more information about like organizing and the need for organizing with the pandemic, and then especially with the response to it from, I guess, the people up top. I think it highlighted how like most of us are in a precarious situation. Like a couple of sneezes and coughs could lead to like the loss of jobs, the loss of life, and how like we need an organized thing in order to actually like handle it. Like we can't really dismantle a pandemic like on an individual basis. And I think that was something that like at least pushed me into organizing more. But I think it definitely has been harder interacting with people like face to face, because it's harder to tell, like especially if you have like asthma or like autoimmune issues, then it's like, can I go outside or can I not? Um, yeah, so it's been a lot of just figuring out the best ways to work with people.
Yeah, I agree, man. You know, the same story as anyone else on this call, and I feel like he probably recruited half of this, half of this organization, whether he was here physically on the physical earth or even in this, you know, in the life. You know, I feel like Kwame Ture has, you know, recruited people through his speeches and stuff. So yeah, I went on a crazy Kwame Ture binge. He's like, you need to organize. So I'm like,
right,
I do need.
He made it organizing. You couldn't refute it. It's like, you love your people, then you got to organize for your people. Like, what do you mean? You say you love your people?
That makes sense.
How you say you love your people and you're not organized for your people? It's like, it's a challenge to like, yeah.
That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah. So he definitely got me to org, but you know, and just seeing and speaking with other members, you know, cadre, senior members have been in the org for like so long. You know, they've told me that in the past or, you know, before pre-pandemic, you know, they were able to meet up and, you know, have meetings. And I think that also gives that more camaraderie feel. And like, you know, so you kind of lose that with the, you know, you know, pandemic and just have it be online, even though you can still have that camaraderie feeling and feel like, okay, I have my comrades with me and we're doing this, we're struggling and, you know, so forth and so on. And obviously also like kind of like what you guys are stating, the groundwork that you can do. Because obviously, you know, me and Jesse, we were part of the Revolutionary Economic Development Task Force. And, you know, in the past, we've had it. And one of the things we utilize is, you know, speaking engagements. Like Kwame Ture would go out to schools, speak, you know, and then we'll utilize that for party funds to, you know, push the party forward in a way. So, you know, I think that kind of hampers that in a little bit. But as things have begun a little bit more lax, even though, you know, people are still dying off, you know, capitalism is trying to sustain itself through this pandemic, you know, and, you know, not really putting people's lives and stuff like that, you know, as a priority. Is kind of more so we need to keep business open, whatever the case is. But, you know, I mean, you can look at it dialectically too and look at it on the other side. But, you know, it does have an effect on us in a sense, you know, with everything that's happening. But, you know, I think we've been pushing through as a party and finding ways and doing our online work studies, which has been, I feel like it's been working great. You know, people from all over are joining, and, you know, I've been seeing, I feel like it's been an increase in different circles popping up and stuff like that from all around, you know, the US and, you know, all over. So, you know, I think it's affected us in a way, but, you know, the struggle doesn't stop, right? We still find ways and alternatives to organize, you know, which is online, you know. So I guess maybe it kind of ties into, maybe we could discuss what ways do we organize remotely in A-APRP since the pandemic or just in general, you know, based off your experience.
I think so far I've done, so at least like this is usually in like places where like we've gotten the chance to be tested before and like made sure that like none of us have like any like easily spreadable diseases. Like a little bit of work like at a homeless shelter, just helping people out there on a like person-to-person level.
Yeah, and as I think of this question, I think of just how organizing works, which just starts with conversation. Like no matter where you are, just talking to folks about the system, just asking them questions like, what do they think about what's going on? That's really kind of an avenue to just start the conversation so that people understand, like, hey, we can handle this because it's an everyday thing. You know, everyday people everybody's being affected by capitalism, and so to have that conversation extended and to open up solutions like, hey, organization. I know often when you tell people you're in an organization, you know, they're like, oh, an organization, like, it's quite official, sounds almost like, oh, I don't know if I can show up. Like I was talking to a friend about this recently, and it's like, oh, well, how long are the meetings? Like they're just trying to get a itinerary because they're trying to factor it in. Like, how can I, and I mean, I'm not saying that that's not important because of course you don't want to commit to something you can't do, but it's understanding the necessity for it. And again, that comes with having those conversations and just talking to people about how they can organize, whether you're out, at work, that's another thing about the principles thing, like we have the principles because we find the value in ideological struggle. So when you have that, you're going every day, everyone is seeing that in your life. And that just sort of like leads to eventually organizing.
Yeah, like I know for us, we utilize a lot of social media, especially since the whole pandemic, trying to find ways to do that and, building coalitions as well with other organizations, obviously remotely, as, try to collaborate on certain things that we could work on, whether it's ideological or, as the pandemic has eased up a little bit and, even though it really hasn't because the death tolls are still high, but in a way, the restrictions have eased up in a sense. We've been able to, like, for me personally, like I've connected with BMU, Black Men United, and, we've connected with Malcolm X grassroots movement and stuff like that. So like, we're finding ways, through this whole madness to do so. So I know that those are some of the good ways and, utilizing, things like Zoom and obviously we have to, given the pandemic, find a way to meet. But I guess that's a good, follow-up for me would be like, I guess what would be some alternatives or some ideas I think we could think outside of the box in the sense that, we don't control these, these are multinational corporations or like, there's capitalists that own these applications. Like, is it effective for us to have backup plans in case, you see what her communists, their whole thing got taken down off Twitter. I think they're still on Instagram, but their account is on Twitter got taken down. Free hood communists, by the way. So I guess what would you guys say like would be a good alternative to some of these applications that we may be using as an online space, like, or what can we do as an alternative to that in the pandemic?
Well, I think for one, it's just knowing that we have to look at alternatives. I mean, we have apps like Telegram, and I'm not trying to give shout outs to these companies that, that's neither here or there. But the point is, like, we need to always think of ways we can effectively organize whatever that looks like, so that we're not hampered and we feel like we can't do it because, as technology evolves, people are getting information new ways. And I think that's what Zoom is. We're getting a lot of programs, educational programs are done through Zoom, and we're kind of forced to engage this way anyway. And so I think it's just about necessitating why we're doing it, bringing that call to action. That's what the political education, like having these conversations so that people understand none of these things are just random. The need to organize have been there since the colonial masters have had the rule, and neocolonialism and all these things the forces are out there doing what they can every day through television or through technology, through the entertainment industry. So it's just to understand that we got to combat that. We have to arm ourselves with that same type of organization so that we are not fooled by the newer ways they can trick us to, jump into the system and follow along with oppression. So it's just like, whether it's, obviously physical, I think once the pandemic will eventually slide down and people can get together, it'll be more effective to meet up with people because it is important to have that physical connection and to meet up with people and to establish, to organize with folks in real time so that you have their numbers, establishing a chain of communication so that what's going on. I mean, we're in Black August now, and that's something I thought about as well. When you think of the political prisoners, like we're already putting ourselves in a position, we're doing propaganda for the A-APRP just to organize the masses of African people. So we know what we're doing, but we're doing it because we know it's important. But we also want to keep that communication with the people who've been, jailed for this. That's the whole idea. Like, we got to remind people that there are people doing the work, and we got to sustain that and communicate.
Yeah, I think for trying to do stuff completely independent of, I guess, like the controlling forces is like pretty difficult in the sense of like even the internet itself, like getting access to it is like something that isn't controlled by us per se, or like, so like really anything that relies on anything that isn't like person to person contact can be like contaminated, can be controlled externally. So I think it's more so of a just like spreading as much as you can, sharing as much as you can while you still have the chance to. So for example, with Hood Communists, they're taking off Twitter, but like for the time that they're on Twitter, they still had the chance to communicate with people, radicalize people, show people, hey, like this is how the world is working, and like this is how we can organize against it. Uh, it's especially with the pandemic where it's harder to interact with people face to face. I'm not sure if there's an alternative that'll like. I don't think there's a perfect alternative that's like completely independent, but for the tools that we do have, just use it as much as we can for the purposes that we want.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, I think that's how we should look at social media. Is just like, whether it's like a main, like a known application or it's not known, because at some point some of these applications could be known, and then once it gets to that point and capitalists have their hand on it, then it's like you're more liable to get your account taken down, whatever the case is, some level of like repression or whatever that happens and takes place. So I think we should just use it as a tool as the meantime to try to help organize people. Obviously, in the midst when the pandemic first started, that was really the only tool we had because everybody was on lockdown. But I don't know, I think it's always good to find new ways, like, send blast emails, like have like something set up in that case, like to people, get people's emails, when you're, meeting up with them or you're having meetings online or something, or you're speaking with other orgs, like, try to be maybe on like different webinars where you could capture emails as well, and then send out blast campaigns or something like that. Like, hey, we're going to be doing this on this date. You're going to be having, just to have people get attention. And I'm speaking more so for like in the lockdown situation, right, where you're really limited, like you can't do anything. Obviously, in this case, a lot of states have lifted a lot of restrictions, so you're able to do a lot more, in person than as before. It was like, you really couldn't do anything. You were confined to your house. So I think just trying to find new ways to get the info out there. You may be shut down on one app. Hopefully you're not shut down on the other ones. Twitter may get you, Facebook will be so forth and so on. So, I think that's a good way. So I think another thing we could probably talk about is maybe how to learn, in a situation where COVID isn't, it's kind of like in the stage it's in now. Even though I feel like some states may go back to lockdown or things may reverse given, the high rates and, death tolls and stuff like that, and the amount of people hospitalized. What are some ways in these times now that we could learn from people and their material needs, like, our neighborhoods and stuff? Like, what ways can we go about that?
Again, you got to talk to folks, just really learning and practicing tactics of doing that. I mean, it's not always easy to, really talk about the things that everyone is dealing with. Like, everyone is struggling. I mean, that's the whole system's illusion, is to make us feel like, oh yeah, we all good, everybody's doing this stuff. But obviously the masses, most people are not doing well, and they're hiding behind trauma and suffering. They're overworked. So I guess it's just about opening those conversations and reminding people of type of things like what we're doing right now, like just spreading the word so that people understand that there's a call to action. Like, we need to do something because we're in a war. Like, this is not conspiracy. We're not just talking because this is, it's just like, that's one of the things Kwame Ture, a reference back to him, is just like the consciousness, it's like when you are aware of that, it's your responsibility to do something about it, and it's just about bringing that, and finding ways, the development of propaganda, that's what that is, the dissemination of information, wherein you're able to produce, content, giving people outlook and apparatus to say, look, here's a historical understanding of what we know about capitalism. Like, this isn't a conspiracy. This is definitely what's following along. And then you learn and you build through that, and you criticize if necessary, so that you get a higher understanding. It's just putting pressure to that process. And the material needs, like I said, people are pretty honest when you talk to them about the things, and they know what that's like. I mean, especially COVID showed, I think, out of all of the manifestations of stuff like this, COVID has really it's just whipped the veil off. Like, yo, you could see the government, like, capitalism is really not in the interests of the masses, and more people are being awakened to that. That's what I can say through these processes. I've seen more and more people have these kind of conversations. More and more people are talking about socialism and communism. So we're definitely we're seeing that work being done, but we have to, keep going in spite of the conditions. And those barriers, I mean, again, like talking to people in the middle of a pandemic, a lot of people, if you had still people wanting to travel, like people still wanting to go over and go to these shows, if they still want to do all that, then they could still organize. You could find ways of bringing that. It's just, again, reminding yourself of why we're doing it, because where we're about to go, we can already see it's not going to be pretty. We got to get together on this because they're coming harder. And that's the COVID issue is affecting mostly African people and, marginalized people. So that's a higher call to that action.
And I think something that's changed since the beginning of the pandemic is that it's more normalized to have video calls with people. So like I know especially group video calls. So like I know before there was like Skype and like FaceTime and like all the other apps. I think nowadays it's something that like at least most people with access to the internet is probably utilizes more often than they did in the past. So like really at this point you can just say, hey, like I want to learn more about like what your life is, how life is going on with COVID and the pandemic and everything. Like can we go on the phone and call or like do a Zoom or something? And then just like ask, like how are things going on?
Yeah. I think Ahjamu talks about. I was looking for the book earlier. I know I got some.
Library.
Yeah. I don't know why I put the book, but yeah, Ahjamu in his book, I'll probably put it in the description, like we always do. Talks about ways you can understand the material needs. And I know one thing he talked about is like kind of talking to the people, taking surveys to figure out, okay, like what are the needs of the people, right? Like, do we, because ideally, all oppressed people deal with the same thing, displacement, houselessness, and, impoverishment just in general. But, there's certain things that could be nuanced in your particular area that you may not, account for. And if you're not tapping in with that and the material needs, people will feel like, oh, well, you're not tapping in with the people, at the same time. You always got to make sure that you're engaged with the people in your area to understand those needs, because if they feel like their needs not fulfilled, they're going to feel like, why are you even, what's the point of your organization? Like
survey is a good point to that. Yeah. Like a lot of things are nuanced. It might be the police might be a problem in that particular area, or it might be something else, gang violence or whatever. So like you gotta,
exactly. So go ahead.
You just gotta ask.
Yeah, that's all it is, man. You gotta ask and figure out like how, what can we do like to make sure we touch on these things and get those addressed, as I guess maybe you want to do like categorically, like, okay, this is most important. We need to address this, because people said that, police violence or whatever the case is number one. So that needs to be addressed first. Whereas if you just go off the whim, like, oh, I think all Africans deal with this, and then, you put it's number one and it's not really applicable, or like it's prioritized in your particular area, right? So I always got to get accounted for.
And one thing I'm just remembering, because you all did an interview, or I know you, Jeffrey, did an interview with Ahjamu, you and Evan, and that's one thing he said. It's just like, be honest with people. Like, tell people, look, we don't got nobody. We need you. Like, I'm here. Like, don't tell people you got the company and you don't have the company. It's like, just let people know, look, I'm trying to build this movement. You're working with, I'm not doing this for you. Like, this is a collective thing. So just having that open honesty, because that's the system tells us that we can do all these things individually. And we're so misled to believe that there's nothing that can be done as a collective, when there's a lot that can be done as a collective. In fact, everything that has any action that's been made has been through the collective masses. I mean, we're forced to think it's just these individuals, but that's never how any movement has been made. So we have to just, put a focus to that, the collective understanding of it all.
I guess maybe we could talk about looking at it dialectically, like circling back to social media. I guess what are some like positives to like utilizing social media? You know, because obviously there's a negative that we talked about with the account possibly being taken down due to the politics that you're posting, and especially if you get a lot of notoriety and a lot of big following on there. Obviously, you're more your likelihood of getting shut down is high. But you know, there's also the positive. Like I guess what would be some good effects of, you know, in the midst of a pandemic, of utilizing social media, and how should we use it in a sense to like push our party forward for any organization?
Well, I guess primarily you have access to people and ideas that you wouldn't have probably met or interacted with in person.
That's true. Yeah, that's another side too. I never looked at it like that. It's true. Like you don't, not that you can't, because a lot of people are shy. There are barriers to physical communication, obviously, but I do think, you know, when you're online, you might come across a post or whatever, just like, oh, and it's shared. You can share it with more people more quickly. So, but I mean, in the same vein, there's that disconnection where people almost forget what they shared, or forget to deep dive, to do independent sources. Like, you know, it's one thing to just watch a video, and I mean, you can't get a degree from YouTube. I know it seems like a lot of people got these YouTube degrees. They watch, I watch this video. It's like, read the independent. Like, have you read the book of that person? If you haven't read the book and you just going off of a video, and if it's not even the whole video, just somebody else talking about the video, it's like,
exactly.
That's not.
You got to get primary sources, man.
Yeah, primary sources.
Yeah,
definitely. And I know you did a podcast in Winfred. You did one with Evan, I believe, the studying and not reading. Like, those are two differences. You can't just say, you know, you reading it. I read this stuff. It's like, yeah, but are you studying it enough to, you know, because ideas change over time. Like you grow into an understanding better than before the more you read something that you've read before, because information is constantly, you know, we're growing with this thing, and that's what organizing. Again, we're in a pandemic right now, but we still find a way. I mean, think of how the system uses verses, for instance, right? It's a pandemic, but people glued to verses, people glued to watching other people. So if there are ways we can adapt to the way capitalism shows us interaction. I mean, in the way it's like technology or effective organizing can be done in the same way. It's just having that commitment and understanding why we need to do it.
Yeah, that's a good, like, you know, analogy there with verses, because anything can be utilized as a weapon, you know, in a struggle. You know, the enemy uses our identity, you know, especially identity now. I think that's very prevalent now. You know, that represents that identity politics that they utilize, you know, like, oh yeah, look, Obama, you guys should be happy. Yay, freedom for Africa. You feel me? So I feel like we should also, in our sense, like, try to utilize anything that we could get our hands on to advance, you know, our interests, in a sense, and social media being one. I mean, like, it's a lot easier too. Like, you could spread propaganda in, like, you know, 2 seconds and have like 30,000 people view it or something. Like, and you don't always have to have a big following. You can have a small following, and you know, and I'm talking about like people like with their party pages and stuff like that. So when they post it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, it's easier to get like kind of what you were saying, Winfred, easier to get the message across to everybody, like, on, like, pretty quickly. So people who, like, you know, you may be organizing your specific location, you know, without a pandemic, maybe just focus on that. But if you are more so like a national or international organization, you're trying to reach the masses, you know, you putting something online and reaching someone else, like, you know, on the West Coast or Canada or whatever the case is, you know, it kind of could just get their attention. You could be recruiting people that you don't even know, right? And get their attention. And especially if you're constantly doing it, like videos or like pictures or whatever the case is, graphics and stuff like that, you know, that could lead to that as well. So, you know, I think those are like some of the benefits that social media could work in.
And the Marcus Garvey here and what he did with his publications with the
exactly, yeah,
constantly putting out information with the UNIA, and yeah, you got to go. All of those different ways of propaganda are there that can be reached, the consistency of it. And sometimes it's hard to connect with people. But again, if you can look at the correlations of how they connect, like, it's just about a fundamental, that's what this revolution is, just to fundamentally change we're trying to fundamentally change the values of society, because society got it all jacked up to individualism. And we're trying to remind folks that we got to do it through the collective masses, and that it ain't going to be through the individual thing. So you got to, showing people through education, having an ideological education, understanding the importance of it. It just makes it, you have that objective. It's not just like you're talking for the service of getting followers, or, to be like a not Dr. Umar Johnson, or anyone else who's professing some sort of, knowledge of some, if they're not talking about collective organizing, not about that.
Exactly. Yeah, like you cannot individualize the struggle, man. Like at all. That's not gonna work. And if you feel like you can free us all, hey, I'm waiting for you, man. Free us.
Yeah. Please do it already.
Hey, capitalism is killing me, man. If you need help, let me know, man. Free yourself. I appreciate it. But I think one aspect, kind of like what I was alluding to earlier, was like the fundraising aspect of it, right? Like, obviously, if you could go to, like we were doing, back when Kwame Ture was still around in our presence, going to colleges, having different speaking engagements, and maybe doing different drives and stuff like that. I guess, what are some, alternatives, especially with us, me and Jesse, being a part of the Revolutionary Economic Development Task Force in the party, maybe you want to speak on that and other ways that we could do fundraising, or any ways that an organization could do fundraising, in the midst of a pandemic where things are locked down and you really don't, can't really do speaking engagements and go on campuses or whatever the case is, do drives or do stuff to raise money in person.
I feel like I've seen definitely more mutual aid things like online. So like whether it be like, just people just posting on the regular. So like posting like funny content or whatever. And then at the end of it, or like just like independently, them like mentioning, hey, like this family needs help, this family needs support. I think I've actually seen those more often now over the pandemic, as opposed to beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely seen more tweets where they'll, somebody will give you what's going on with their situation and asking for donations or whatever. And of course, if somebody who has a larger following retweets that can add, more visibility and help. So yeah, definitely more mutual aid things I've seen, GoFundMe, things like that, where people are making even streams, talking like live streams, getting all kind of things just to help. I mean, there are ways of, it's kind of like, it's interesting to see how people have turned to using technology in the middle of what's going on now, because it's pretty much like, the lockdown situation. It's also caused a lot of skepticism and brought a lot of people sort of, just unsure about everything, just getting that information. So, I mean, that's why it's just important to have that clear analysis, because because with information, there's a lot of narration that can be easily, turned into.
Yeah. Like, I think one caveat of having things online is that the way that people verify whether or not you're like honest is your content. But then the content is like completely controlled by you. So like, on one hand, like you have to put more energy into like posting online, like making pictures or videos or like informational graphics, to like show that like you're doing what you're doing. But then that can also detract from the time you have available to do like organizing with people in person. And then it also means that people who are, I guess like media or social media experts who are good at like talking loud or like using revolutionary language, can portray themselves as being part of the revolution and organizing without actually doing any organizing among like the masses of people.
Oh, that takes me, you saying that just brings me to a lot of people I'm thinking of on Twitter who uses that revolutionary language. And that's a very Yeah, that we could do a whole other podcast on revolution.
Yeah.
Like, people think, oh, this is actually. I mean, it actually reminds me. Yesterday, I saw Respect, the Aretha Franklin film. Of course, I was expecting them to mention, her work with Louis Farrakhan. Of course, they didn't mention that, but they were mentioning. There were certain subtle jabs I was surprised of. Like they mentioned, in the beginning of the. Not to have any spoilers, but I mean, it was pretty shocking to me. In the beginning, they had some sort of party going on, and there were various conversations you would hear. And one of the conversations was, communism is for the Africans. I was like, what? Okay. Communism is for the Africans. I was surprised by them adding that. And they did show how Aretha Franklin was, we got to organize. She mentioned Angela Davis, of course. But it was just kind of like interesting to see how, the media is they're very aware, using this language that can give people the impression of a revolution. But of course, it's always assimilation as opposed to actual, just abolishing it and creating a new thing. So revolutionary language, I'm talking about that. I'm going off of that, but that's not even more conversation. But yeah,
we were going to that, man. I'm down.
Yeah, I can go into that.
Listen, social media gets used. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about utilizing social media, and that you have those people who co-opt, people who have true intentions, revolutionary intentions. I think there's some guy. I don't know the full story, to be honest. I skimmed through it. I really didn't care about it too much, but you kind of see it all the time. This guy is pretty much bought a $3 million home, I guess, off of utilizing socialists,
oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, come on, that's what I'm saying. It's that's the thing where it's about principles. Like that, can you really say that that's a? I mean, that's definitely not class suicide. If you that's the money I'm making. Like you could think of what that money could do for various means, and you're and say buy a house is that's equivalent to the Black Lives Matter woman. Forget her name, but yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I think she got nice. She kind of did something similar. Got a super big.
Come on, no, this is about the people. This is about the people. It's not persons and people involving themselves, talking about these issues. That's the whole thing about individualizing it and not being a part of an organization as well. If you talking all this stuff, you're not a part of no organization. You're just trying to get people to follow you because you're talking about Marxism or socialism and all that. But you don't have that connection, then it's just that's kind of like the work of the enemy. It's you're not actually showing it, you're just saying it. That's anyone can do that, right? It's just about having that principle and understanding why we're in this work, committing it,
I think another thing is, another two things is especially when giving or seeking fundraising and mutual aid, at least having a clear understanding of what the goal of it is. I remember some fundraising from organizations that was in honor of such and such person's death, we're collecting funding. It didn't say what it was for. It was just in honor of this person's death. And then at that point is just literally profiting off of somebody's death without necessarily even saying that you're going to use it to prevent that from happening again in the future. And then a second thing, having processes of being accountable to the people who are not to the people who are giving the money or to just the masses of people or the masses of African people in general. Because if we give you money or if you give me money and then there's no way to really verify that I'm using it towards what I say I'm using it towards, then really anybody could step up and say, oh, I'm a revolutionary, now give me money.
That's what they're doing. I mean, that's what the Democratic Party is doing. I mean, that's what the story of was. Who was it? Just sent a bunch of people asking for money to build. I forget who representative it was, but it was in the middle of a pandemic. Obviously, right now, one of the Congress people was "Yeah, donate to our situation." It's you asking people to donate, but you can't give them health care. You can't give them any of the their needs are not being met, but you want them, to help you run a campaign. Like that just shows you the backwardness there.
Exactly. It's so sick, man. And I think that's something we've talked about in in our task force, like, trying to figure out ways to show people what this money is being utilized for. Because I think there's been so much scamming, like you stated, like with the Dr. Umar's. I'm building a school, like 10 years.
Exactly.
There's no school.
I mean, if the school is built, then we'll see.
Yeah. I guess,
we'll have to see about that.
He ain't building no school. He ain't doing that. None of these people.
Oh, dang.
He's not like, because he's like any of those other people who are literally using a probe. And because there's another guy who was, that's what's going on right now. I'm not sure if you all seen a video of people sharing. It's obviously ridiculous. A bunch of black men just walking, and it's like, oh, this is black excellence. And it's like,
with the music playing in the background and stuff.
And it's like, but there are no disabled people. There are no LGBT people. Clearly, like they making it's like, this is what black is like. That's the issue right there. Like showing these regulated images and then not addressing these really like patriarchy and homophobia and transphobia. Like, but yeah, so like people using, like he uses that. Like a lot of these people, they use whatever they can use so that they can get money, because he's making money off of these people. People are actually sharing his content and actually are supporting. So, I mean, that shows you like there is actually misleading going on, and, it's not like it ain't working. So,
exactly. Yeah. So like, I think it's definitely important to show what you're doing, because like, and I think one of the things we're doing here in our task force is like, we're trying to build a shop. We sell a lot of revolutionary content and clothes and stuff like that. And obviously, we're trying to make sure it's at affordable prices. This is, we're not trying to run no like exploitative situation here, like system. So
no $500 sweatshirts.
Right.
This team for $600. Support the revolution. Before me paying off my house.
Like, no, none of that. We ain't selling.
Yeah. So like, yeah, man, I think that's, something that people could do, set up online shops, like kind of similar to what we're doing, like to try to have different campaigns. So a lot of people just promote their Cash App for the organization, whether PayPal or Venmo, whatever the case is, as well. So I guess in that sense, online, I think fundraising or mutual aid a little bit is it's been a little bit easier with like online, or maybe you could say a lot more easier, because you can just put it out there and people can help support and see it, and I want to donate to this, and obviously, like we were stating before, put context behind it. This is what we're doing. This is what we're raising money for. It's going towards revolutionary work, because I think a lot of people kind of, especially me, like I've seen so many people get hoodwinked, or like see a lot of these scammers and grifters out there that just like take money and just look to exploit people. At the end of the day, say, oh yeah, we're using it for revolutionary means, and then nothing materializes out of it. Yeah. You don't really see the effects of it. No one is saying, oh yeah, this is this organization is help. Like you may even go to that particular neighborhood. You're like, what organization? I don't know what that is. I know they took my money, but I ain't. I don't know what they be doing out here. So yeah, so I think that's definitely important in that sense. So yeah, I mean, do you guys have anything else you want to add or bring up in relation to this?
I guess this is kind of off tangent, but I guess in terms of like learning about like what's going on through theory, and this is more so towards the question of like asking people about the material needs. Like I guess the importance of like actually asking like people like currently, in the sense that like reading theory is like always important. It provides like it can provide an ideological base and give like a lot of like historical context, and to not at the same time not overlook like just asking people about what they need and like how their actual situation is at. I guess like mainly because like a lot of the theories were created and made from like people talking about their material needs, and like things aren't static. Like systems change or adapt all the time. so to like only rely on theory, which gets its validity from just like asking people in the past, and not like asking people in the current day. It can lead to a schism. So like even Du Bois, like Kwame Nkrumah, like both of them did surveys of people at the time, and like that's how they're able to get their ideologies and their ideological foundations. So we can just keep on doing that today.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a great point. Like the Pan-African Congresses, there was a lot of work into researching, like you were stating, Winfred, like, what are the needs and what works. And like you said, like, like theory without practice, is empty, right? Like you don't know if it works unless you try it. You could theorize all day, but if you don't apply it and try it out, you won't know if it's right or wrong, right? So you're just going to be stuck in a black hole, just like sitting at home and not really affecting anything. Granted, you might be, more ideologically aligned and sharper, but, you don't know if what you're doing is going to be effective because you haven't tried it. So I think that's a very good point. And then you have to understand, like you stated, the needs of the people. So, the Pan-African Congresses and then, what we understand as Pan-Africanism as defined in the Fifth Pan-African Congress was the slew of just various, revolutionaries that were actually taking account and researching into various needs of the masses on the continent. So, and off the continent as well. Because you have representatives from all over, especially the Fifth Pan-African Congress and workers and things of that nature. So yeah.
And Garvey started off doing union work too.
Yeah.
That just reminded me of what we were talking about in work study today, how like there was these conferences going on then and people were attending, and it was a thing where people were understanding the need to be, to have independence, and it was a collective unit of solidarity, all kind of folks coming together. Whereas now it's, our comrade Jamila mentioned how it's just different now. Now there's not that understanding. People are not as, there's just this distance and divide, and people don't have that awareness because, we have, with the emergence of technology and other forms of just state propaganda utilized to just convince people to not think, you're just basically hearing the words of your master. That's what causes just that distance. But then you realize that it doesn't have to be like that, because there's the political education that can be put in to combat that work. But there's so much of that where people are not even aware of those, the Fifth Pan-African Conference, like saying that to people are like, what? Like, Fifth Pan-African Conference. Yeah, these things happen. These are things that actually provided the foundation of the work we're doing. But most people don't have that knowledge because they're, they're hijacked by state propaganda.
Yeah. The school institutions aren't teaching us about the Fifth. It's like y'all were slaves and y'all came to America.
Right, exactly.
That's all we need to know about y'all. Now
they're even teaching that. Now they're like,
right. They're
African workers.
Yeah. Wait, what are they teaching now?
So like if you look at some textbooks, like they don't even say slaves. Like sometimes they say like African workers immigrated to the US.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We came on the Mayflower, like, we looking for some opportunity.
Right.
That's what happened. This is sick.
That's what they gonna tell you. They ain't gonna tell you the truth. They gonna say it just like that. Just as exactly, because I have seen those and imagine reading that and not having, the proper education to combat that. You just like, oh well. Guess that's what there are people. I don't even know who this. I'm not gonna even shout out his name. I can't even remember it, but he was basically following. He was speaking without actually reading, saying just a lot of nonsense about how we white people got it bad right now, and we need to treat them like white men particularly. And he was saying how slavery's like, I know Africans, we've been through a lot, but we got to think of how it is for white people. He was basically arguing that inclusion is causing the degradation of white men, and suggesting that because we're including trans and people of color and all these other people, white men are being shunned out. It was it was a hot potato.
Yo.
I was like, what? You can't tell me that. It's like but that's the type of, and this dude has a lot of followers. You know, it's just like you playing around with that fire of
Was it European who said this?
No, this was an African man. This is an African man saying.
Oh man, this is
European man. This is an African man saying this.
I don't know if y'all ever seen that Khalid Muhammad clip where he's like,
yeah.
this is a sick Negro. I don't know. Yo, man, what the
I need to find that.
Oh yeah, I think I've been having my phone. I use it too much. Like it's somewhere it's in my recent folder because I see I use it more than I would like to use it. Like
yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah. I just was like, wow, we got work to do. We got work to do. That's why we, we're part of that whole, I mean, we're doing propaganda too. I mean, that's the whole thing, like giving the masses that understanding, the necessity to organize, understanding we're in a war against, Africa's being exploited. People are being, brutalized by these systems of oppression. And it's, if you love your people, what you doing?
Exactly. I mean, you got to put it where you can't just be arguing with some like account in who knows where, on Twitter, like, oh yeah, like this is me putting in the work, just constantly tweeting. I mean, I get it. You can get it, engage in ideological struggle everywhere, like social media, in person, whatever. But, you have to put work behind that. Like you have to put work behind your politics. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just talking. Like, so that must mean you're not that dedicated to what you believe. It just feels like you want to just believe it because it's cool, like it's fashionable or something to you, or it sounds great. But if you're not putting in the work, like, so what are you doing to see the reality that, that you believe is the correct thing? Because these capitalists are working to maintain this exploitative system. That's their dream, right? To have a mansion or, all these crazy things and live in excess off the back of the workers and, and stuff like that. So, so it's like you have to put in the work too. So that's why we always stress you on an organization. Hence why this even topic even came up, right? It's like, how could we be more effective in organizing the masses in the midst of the pandemic? And to be honest, I think, people have more time, at least in the sense of when it first happened.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Like we can't really... Man, those Kwame Ture videos have me like, yeah, Jesse, what you gonna do? What you gonna devise us? What you gonna say? What you gonna say that? What's gonna make you not do this? Like, know that you need to do it. It's the truth. Like these are historical facts. The Berlin Conference happened. They actually divided Africa. Like that happened. That wasn't they actually said, yeah, let's divide. Let's decide who gets to take what. So like coming into that analysis, it put it's like, yeah, okay, I got to do something about it. And it's also a highlight to the point of how we participate within the system. I mean, to some degree, some people are disabled to not take action to certain things because they don't have the ability to, but there's still always, you don't negotiate with your boss when it comes to work. You got to work, right? You got to, in order for you to have the bills, you commit, you make that time. And there's been more time given to us now. So it's like we can't be lazy. There's no reason to be slack about it. It's like, we got to do something about it because we're already seeing what it's doing to the environment. We're already seeing what it's doing to Africa. We're seeing what it's doing to all of the colonized places in the world where they don't have their independence. Like capitalism is killing them in real time. It's happening. It ain't just is not. So we got to do something about it. We got to just say goodbye to the whole notion that it ain't happening and that it's just like, nah, man, we can make it in the system. We can vote. You can't do none of that. You gotta organize if you want to change.
Yeah, that's true, man. You gotta organize, man. You gotta. Hey, listen. Even though I have ideological struggle with people or disagreements. People who think they can work within the system. But hey, if you organize around that, I respect you because at least you organizing around what you believe that will liberate Africans. Even though we oppose that, we want to see overall overthrow and change. But it's kind of like Sekou Toure said. I'm paraphrasing, but you it's better to organize than to do nothing at all, because at least when you organize, you can see the defects, within the organization to change and, change your objectives, whatever the case is, or the tactics that you may be utilizing as well. So, but if you're not doing anything, you're not doing nothing. So, there's nothing you can do. Like whether, you just want to talk all day, it's not going to change anything. But if you're actually putting in work, you can say, oh, okay, we were wrong. We tested this out. We thought, voting was going to lead us to liberation. We see that's not working. We thought, identity politics is going to help us. We thought so X, Y, and Z, and you see the faults and you just, you move accordingly.
You learn from it and then do better.
Exactly. And you get better. Exactly, man. So yeah, so I guess one of my last words would be like, if you haven't joined the organization, join the organization Fighting for Justice. To free African and other oppressed people. Feel free to join the A-APRP. We have the link in the description as well. We also have other podcasts airing, various ones. We have the links in the description as well for that. So feel free to tap in with our other comrades within the party as well that are hosting various other podcasts too. So yeah, anybody else have any other last things they want to say? Or
I would just, as we always say, forward ever, because whether we're in the pandemic for another 2 years, which the rate we're going, since people not even putting on the mask, then who knows how long we're going to be in this thing. But even if we ain't in this thing, we're going forward because we understand, regardless, that's what we got to do. We're in this war and we're going to win. The more we collectively come to that understanding of why we got to get together and fight this beast while we living in the belly of the beast. So yeah, organize, y'all.
Organize, yeah. All right, man. So I guess forward ever, y'all. See y'all in the next episode.
Forward ever.